Greetings, Bone Daddies. This hour-long video chronicles the origins of the Dr BoneDaddy channel, from its spine-chilling infancy to the scary story behemoth that it has become. Please enjoy as we take you on a terrifying journey through the first 9 original frightening stories we have presented for your displeasure. First up, the twins. Jack and John were identical twin boys, 12 years of age, but despite their physical similarity, they were very different in personality. Jack was the adventurous one, always eager to explore new things, while John was reserved and cautious. One day they decided to skip school and visit the traveling carnival that had just come to town. As they walked through the carnival, which looked like the stuff of children's nightmares, they became fascinated by the lifestyle and longed for a way out of their own dreary existence of preteen suburbia with overbearing parents. What particularly fascinated the boys were the different sideshow freaks. The bearded lady, the strongmen, the sword swallowers, and the wolf boy all captured their attention. The twins watched in awe as the sideshow performers interacted with the audience, performing death-defying feats and telling stories of their adventures. Jack and John were awestruck at the sights, sounds, smells of this other world. They struck up conversations with some of the performers, sharing stories about their own lives and dreaming of running away to join the carnival. The sideshow performers placated the boys with, Sure, one day when you're old enough, etc. But when the boys romanticized the life and talked about running away from home, the performers one by one cautioned the boys and flat out scolded them that this life would not be the first choice for anyone and isn't the life they would have chosen if they had another path to success. When you're a bearded lady or a wolf boy, your options are limited if you don't have a regular subscription with Gillette. They all told the boys to forget the carnival and grow up to be doctors or lawyers, something with a future that was free of ridicule. John and Jack, though, could not be discouraged. John still had some hesitancy about running away from home, being the cautious one, but Jack convinced him that this was the life that they should lead. One day they ran into the fortune-teller's tent. The boys never told her what they wished for, but the fortune she laid out before them made perfect sense to them. They were going to experience an adventure like no other, and that this adventure would bring them closer together for the rest of their lives. Excited by this news, the boys pleaded with the ringmaster carnival owner about the possibility of joining the carnival. The ringmaster, a scruffy, tall, thin wisp of a man with fingers like crab legs 2 sizes longer than normal, scoffed at the boys. "What could you do for me? You can't lift a tent pole, operate a ride. 2 underage boys, not even a pimple yet between the 2 of you." "But sir, we can do anything," Jack said. "Yes, anything," piped in John. "Anything, eh? Let me think on it overnight. Come back tomorrow." Elated, the boys ran home at a sprinter's pace, flew inside their home, straight to their room, and started packing up clothes, some toys, and the only other things that they valued. They could hardly sleep that night and dreamed of a new life, a new adventure. Early the next morning, their mother made them breakfast, but the boys barely spoke a word. Their mother tried to talk to them about homework, an upcoming trip to the library, and that their grandmother was coming over the weekend for a visit. Once their mother's back was turned, Jack nudged John to get his attention and put his hands to his throat in a choking "please kill me" gesture. John burst out laughing. "What's so funny?" their mother asked. "Oh, nothing. Jack farted," said John. Their mother scoffed. "Can we go now?" Jack said. Their mother waved them off, and off they went. The boys grabbed a suitcase with all their prized possessions, which they had hidden outside their window the previous night, and it was off to the races to the carnival. "We're here!" they exclaimed to the ringmaster. "Did you think of a job for us?" Jack said. "Indeed I have. Come with me, boys." The ringmaster led them to a small tent. Inside it was dark and had the faint smell of ether and iodine. The ringmaster creeped up behind the boys. He brandished a wet cloth in each hand and quickly clasped those hands to their faces, covering their noses and mouths with the wet cloth. The boys were quickly knocked out cold. That night, the carnival pulled up stakes and scurried out of town to the next hamlet down the road. Later that night, a spotlight beamed on the ringmaster as he stood at the podium in front of the carnival's sideshow arena. "Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, behind this curtain, the Krampus Carnival presents its newest and greatest attraction." The crowd went behind the curtain and gathered in front of a small stage that was covered by a purple curtain. "Behold," said the ringmaster as he pulled on a rope which flew open the curtains to reveal... Jack and John were on stage. They slowly woke up groggy and disoriented. Darkness before them except for the low hum of an expectant crowd. Suddenly, a bright light illuminated them. They had gotten their wish, but more than they had bargained for. The boys were horrified, for Jack and John had been surgically joined together at the torso, only 2 arms between them. They were the newest and greatest attraction at the carnival. Siamese twins. The ringmaster cackled, and the crowd let out a cry of laughter, shock, and horror. Jack and John, crying, tried to separate themselves from each other, but couldn't. The ringmaster walked up behind them and whispered between their 2 heads, "Welcome to the carnival." I don't think I've ever heard of 2 brothers being as close as these 2. It warms the heart. Next up, a tale of revenge. I'd never been so excited for a babysitting job before. The pay was good, the house was beautiful, and the parents seemed really nice. They even left me a note with all their contact information just in case. But not more than 30 minutes after they left, the phone started ringing. At first, I thought it was just a wrong number, but it kept ringing and ringing. Finally, I answered it. "Hello," I said, trying to sound confident. There was silence on the other end, but I could hear someone breathing. "Who is this?" I asked, but there was no answer. The phone rang again a few minutes later, and this time there was a voice. "I'm watching you," a man's voice whispered. "I see everything you're doing." I was terrified now, but I tried to keep my cool. Maybe it was just a prank. I decided to call the parents and ask if everything was okay. But when I picked up the house phone, it was dead. That's when I heard the doorbell ringing. It was a long, insistent ring, and it made my heart race. I crept over to the door and looked through the peephole, but there was no one there. But as soon as I turned away, the phone rang again. This time I was angry. I answered the phone and shouted into the receiver, "Who is this? What do you want?" There was a long pause, and then the man's voice came back. "You're doing a terrible job," he said. "I don't think you're cut out for this kind of work." I hung up the phone and tried to calm myself down. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the parents had set up some kind of security system and forgot to tell me about it. But just then, I heard a window open, and it sounded as if someone came into the house. I hid behind a chair and frantically searched my phone for the parents' phone number, any phone number. I was so freaked out I had trouble even remembering my PIN number to unlock my phone. Geez, what am I gonna do? But then I heard a noise upstairs. It sounded like someone was moving around. I crept up the stairs and saw that one of the doors was ajar. I pushed it open, and there were the parents sitting on the bed. "We're sorry," the mother said, looking contrite. "We just wanted to see how you would handle a stressful situation." I was furious. "You scared the life out of me," I said, my voice shaking. "That's not a funny joke." They apologized again, but I wasn't satisfied. "Yes, I think you'll do fine. We'll be back by 10 p.m., the father said. "Next time you should call us and or the police right away." I decided to get some revenge of my own. When the parents got home, they walked into the home and their mouths dropped to the floor. The house was a mess, a disaster. The dishes were piled high in the kitchen sink, the couch cushions were all over the floor, and there were toys and books strewn everywhere. Frankly, I completely trashed the place. "What the heck happened here?" the mother asked, looking horrified. I just smiled sweetly. "I thought you wanted to see how I would handle a stressful situation." Well, I thought I'd return the favor. That babysitter's got a real mean streak. I like her. She likely grew up to be a teacher. She already knows how to serve up a lesson. Next up, the ghost train. Maria and her friends had been at the amusement park for hours. They had ridden almost every attraction in the park. As they walked around, they came across a section of the park they'd never seen before. The area was old and worn down, with rusted rides and faded signs. One ride in particular caught their attention. It was called the Ghost Train, and it looked like it hadn't been used for years. The entrance was open, and the dark ride tunnel seemed to beckon them in. Maria and her friends approached the ride cautiously. As they stepped inside, they were met with a rush of cold air. The ride was moving slowly at first, but it began to pick up speed as it moved through the tunnel. The sound of creaking metal filled their ears as they made their way deeper into the ride. The darkness around them grew thicker, and the whispers they had heard before grew louder. Maria felt a chill run down her spine as she realized something was wrong. She looked around, but she couldn't see anything in the darkness. Suddenly, the ride came to a screeching halt. It was stuck in the middle of the tunnel, surrounded by darkness. Maria's heart was pounding as she looked around for a way out. That's when she saw it. A figure in the shadows, watching them. It was tall and thin, with eyes that glowed in the dark. Maria couldn't move, couldn't scream, as the figure stepped closer. As it reached out a bony hand, Maria finally found her voice. She screamed, and the ride jolted back to life, hurtling them out of the tunnel and back into the bright lights of the amusement park. Maria and her friends stumbled off the ride, gasping for air. They looked around, but there was no sign of the figure from the ride. Maria knew what she had seen, though, and the memory of the cold, glowing eyes would haunt her for years to come. Days after the incident, Maria kept having nightmares about the figure in the ride. She couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there watching her. One day, she decided to go back to the amusement park to investigate. She walked around the park, looking for any sign of the ghost train ride, but it was nowhere to be found. Just as she was about to give up, she heard a sound coming from behind a nearby building. She cautiously approached the building and peered around the corner, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The ghost train ride was there, but it looked different than before. The rust was gone, and the paint was fresh. It was as if it had been restored overnight. Maria felt a sense of unease as she approached the ride. She stepped inside, and the darkness around her swallowed her whole. The ride moved slowly at first, but it picked up speed as it made its way deeper into the tunnel. The whispers around her grew louder, and the shadows seemed to move. As the ride came to a stop in the middle of the tunnel, Maria braced herself for what was to come. She knew that the figure from before was out there watching her. Suddenly, the figure stepped out of the shadows. It was the same tall, thin figure with glowing eyes that she had seen before. But this time, it spoke. "Welcome back," it said in a voice that sounded like it came from another world. "I've been waiting for you." Maria tried to run, but she couldn't move. The figure approached her slowly, its bony hand outstretched. As the figure touched Maria's hand, she felt a shock run through her body. The world around her began to spin, and she found herself in a strange, otherworldly realm. Maria tried to scream, but no sound came out. She was trapped in this other world with no way to escape. Days turned into weeks, and Maria lost track of time. She was trapped in this realm with no way to contact the outside world. She began to lose hope that she would ever escape. But then one day she saw a glimmer of light in the distance. It was faint at first, but it grew brighter as she moved closer. As she reached the light, she realized it was a portal, a way back to the real world. She stepped through the portal, and suddenly she was back in the amusement park, surrounded by her friends. They were all staring at her in shock. "Maria, where have you been?" one of them asked. Maria realized that she hadn't been missing for weeks. It must have been only an hour or two at the most. But it felt to her like an eternity. But now she was back in the real world. She looked around and she could see the figure from the ride standing in the distance watching her. a glint in his eye, a creepy smile on his face, and a little wave. She knew that she would never go back to that amusement park ever again. The ghost train ride had taken her to a place she never wanted to return to. Maria and her friends left the park. They never spoke of the ghost train ride again. But Maria knew she would never forget what had happened to her there. The figure from the glowing eyes would always haunt her, a reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of the world. I hope she got her hand stamped for the free re-entry. It'd be a shame to have to pay again for a third visit. Next up, the trailer. And now our next story, The Trailer by Cindy A. When I was 14, my parents had been divorced for some time, and I lived with my mother. One weekend, I went to visit with my father, who lived in a trailer park outside of Phoenix, Arizona. The first day there, I was bored to tears, and my father could sense that there was little I could do to keep busy in this park. He got a call from a neighbor who were looking for a babysitter for that night, and would be very late before they returned. My father knew the parents and thought I might want to make a little extra money while I was here and give me something else to do. I finally gave in when he promised that we could go out to dinner the next night. The trailer was up a hill at the edge of a cliff. It was quite a schlep just to get there. When I got to the trailer, it was beyond dilapidated. I mean, wow, this trailer was a dump. The two girls I was there to babysit were 6 and 8 years old. They were very sweet and easy to take care of. They mostly sat in the living room and watched an old tube television with rabbit ears. I went to the back of the trailer to use the restroom, but saw a light on in one of the bedrooms. Curiously, I walked into the room and was immediately startled by an old woman in her 80s who was sitting on a bench and staring out the window. Jesus scared the crap out of me. I didn't know there was anyone else at home. The old woman turned to look at me, but didn't say a word. She then turned back to look out the window. This old woman made me uneasy. There was something about her that just didn't sit right. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, so I slowly backed out of the room when she spoke. "You're not safe here." Looking around at the state of this trailer, I couldn't agree with her more. "I'm only here for the night, so I think I'll be okay," I said. I went back to the living room and asked the kids, "Who is that old lady, your grandmother?" "She showed up about a month ago, just ignore her. We do," the elder girl told me. So I tried just to focus on the kids. We played games and watched a movie and everything seemed fine. But then the old lady stirred and started acting strange. She came into the kitchen and would stare at the walls for long periods of time, muttering to herself. She would turn the lights on and off, and open and close various kitchen cabinet doors repeatedly. I tried to ask her if everything was okay, but she just dismissed me with a wave of her hand, as if to tell me to mind my own business. Later that night, the girls had gone to bed and I had nodded off on the sofa. Suddenly, I was violently shaken awake by this old lady. "It's not safe here," she screamed at me. Disoriented and scared to death, I sprung off the couch and was totally freaked out. I was fast asleep and was barely registering anything after having been so suddenly and unexpectedly woken up. "Huh? What are you talking about?" I said. Then I heard noises outside but couldn't make them out. I crept over to the door and my heart was pounding in my chest. But when I opened the door, there was no one there. But I kept hearing creaking and cracking noises that just seemed to get louder. I was starting to get really scared now. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew I didn't want to stay there any longer. I turned to look back inside the trailer, only to see the old lady now had a very large kitchen knife in her hand. "You're not safe here." I screamed for the girls, who rushed out of their bedroom and joined me at the door. "Leave now," she said, her eyes wild as she raised the knife over her head. Well, that was it. I grabbed the girls, got out of there as fast as I could, and sprinted down the hill toward my father's trailer. The next morning, we all woke up to the sound of sirens and a flood of activity in the trailer park.
It seems that the safety brakes and chocks keeping that trailer at the end of the hill in place had failed, and the trailer rolled off the cliff and was completely destroyed. The very same trailer I was in last night. I was approached by the police who were looking for answers, and I told them about my experience and what had happened with the old lady. The trailer park manager who was standing nearby said no old woman lived in that unit. Well, at least not since a month ago. The old woman who owned the trailer had drowned in the nearby river over a month ago, and the family with the children had only just moved in. Needless to say, I never offered to babysit in that trailer park ever again.
Housing standards sure aren't what they used to be. They have definitely taken a plunge. Next up, Spirit of the Woods. In the remote countryside of Ireland, nestled amidst rolling hills and ancient forests, stood a small village known as Dunmore. The villagers spoke in hushed tones about the nearby forest, claiming it held a dark secret. Legends passed down through generations warned of a malevolent entity lurking within its depths. As the story goes, a young girl named Maeve grew up in Dunmore. Curiosity had always been her nature, and she longed to unravel the mystery that shrouded the forbidden woods. With each passing day, her desire intensified until she could resist it no longer. Ignoring the cautionary tales, she ventured into the heart of the eerie forest, fueled by a mixture of fear and excitement. The forest greeted Maeve with an unsettling silence. The leaves of the ancient trees rustled as if whispering secrets, while the wind carried an unnerving chill. As she ventured deeper, the familiar sights and sounds of the outside world began to fade away, replaced by an otherworldly stillness. Suddenly the forest came alive. Shadows danced and swirled around Maeve, mocking her intrusion. The trees contorted with twisted limbs, their branches reaching out as if to snatch her away. She stumbled upon a clearing where an ominous mist curled at her feet, obscuring her view. From within the fog, a voice echoed, chilling her to the bone.
Maeve,
the voice whispered, a sinister melody in the air.
You should not have come here.
Fear clutched her heart, but a stubborn determination kept her from fleeing. She demanded to know the source of the voice, her voice quivering with a mix of trepidation and defiance. As if in response, the mist cleared, revealing a decaying cottage standing before her. The door creaked open, inviting her inside. Against her better judgment, she stepped over the threshold, the door slamming shut behind her. The room was adorned with faded tapestries, their intricate designs warped by time. Moonlight filtered through a broken window, casting eerie shadows across the floor. The voice resurfaced, resonating throughout the room.
Maeve, I am the spirit of this forest. For centuries I have haunted these woods, seeking souls to claim. You have trespassed upon my domain.
Maeve trembled as she realized the gravity of her situation. She pleaded for mercy, promising to leave the forest forever. But the spirit was unyielding, consumed by a thirst for vengeance. With every word it spoke, the room grew colder, and the walls seemed to close in. In the final moments of desperation, Maeve's eyes fell upon a dusty book on a decrepit bookshelf. With trembling hands, she opened it, hoping for a solution to her plight. Inside, she discovered an incantation whispered by ancient witches to banish evil spirits from the earthly realm. Summoning every ounce of courage, Maeve began to recite the incantation, her voice growing louder and more resolute. The spirit recoiled, writhing in agony as the words filled the room. The walls shook, and the cottage erupted in a blinding light. When the brilliance subsided, the room stood empty, devoid of the malevolent presence that had haunted this forest for centuries. Maeve emerged from the cottage, the weight of the encounter etched upon her face.
She returned to Dunmore a changed person, forever marked by the horrors she had witnessed. The villagers listened with wide-eyed awe as she recounted her harrowing experience, a cautionary tale that would be passed down through the generations, forever instilling fear in the hearts of those who dared to venture into the haunted woods of Dunmore. Incantations are great and all for getting rid of malevolent spirits, but I prefer a 12-gauge shotgun. 2 barrels right into that guy would certainly change his attitude. Next up, the mirror's reflection. In a quaint town nestled amongst rolling hills lived a woman named Emily. Her cozy house, adorned with antique mirrors, held the charm of a bygone era. Emily cherished the ethereal beauty of these reflective surfaces, finding solace in their silent companionship. Little did she know, one mirror held an eerie secret, ready to unravel her world. One stormy night, as rain lashed against the windows, Emily found herself lost in thought. The dim glow of candlelight cast flickering shadows upon the walls, creating an atmosphere both intimate and mysterious. Drawn to the allure of the antique mirrors, she gazed at her reflection, admiring the delicate contours of her face. But as her eyes lingered upon her own reflection, an odd sensation crept over her, a strange disconnection, as though her reflection held a consciousness separate from her own. Bewildered, she blinked, believing it to be a mere trick of the light, but the sensation persisted. Days turned into weeks, and Emily's fascination with the mysterious mirror grew. She found herself spending more time in front of it, captivated by the subtle nuances in her reflection's movements. The mirror's surface seemed to shimmer with a strange energy, beckoning her to unravel its secrets. One evening, as Emily stood before the mirror, a chill ran down her spine. She sensed a presence, subtle yet undeniably palpable. It felt as though someone stood behind her, their breath whispering against her neck. Trembling, she turned around only to find emptiness. Yet when she looked back at the mirror, her reflection held a mischievous glimmer in its eyes. Fear mingled with curiosity as Emily reached out tentatively, her fingers hovering millimeters away from the glass. The reflection, her doppelganger, responded in kind, mirroring her every movement. It smirked, revealing a malevolence that sent shivers down Emily's spine. Driven by a mix of apprehension and determination, Emily began engaging in conversations with her doppelganger. She sought to understand the nature of this uncanny phenomenon. The reflection responded with cryptic words, weaving tales of forbidden knowledge and untapped power. Emily's mind teetered on the edge of obsession, desperate to uncover the truth. Was this really even happening? Was she going out of her mind? Days turned into nights as Emily spent hours conversing with her doppelganger, their relationship becoming a macabre dance of curiosity and fear. The reflection taunted her with cryptic hints, dangling forbidden secrets just out of reach. Emily's once serene existence became consumed by the mirror's twisted allure. One fateful night, as the moon hung low in the sky, the reflection beckoned Emily to enter the mirror, a portal to a realm where answers awaited. The temptation was too great, and the desperation too overwhelming. Emily, her heart pounding, stepped closer to the mirror, her hand reaching out hesitantly. As her fingertips brushed against the mirror's surface, an invisible force enveloped her. She felt herself being pulled, her body fading away, and her reality disintegrating. In an instant, she was swallowed by the looking glass, her existence merging with that of her doppelganger. Within the mirror's realm, Emily found herself in a twisted reflection of her own world. The once familiar surroundings now held an eerie, distorted quality. She tried to call out, but her voice echoed hollowly, lost in the ethereal abyss.
Meanwhile, in the real world, a woman with an uncanny resemblance to Emily moved into the town. She too had a fondness for antique mirrors and an enigmatic smile. The townsfolk embraced the woman, mistaking her for the real Emily. She seamlessly slipped into her new identity, playing the part flawlessly. Behind the charming facade, the doppelganger reveled in her newfound existence, delighting in the irony that the very mirror that had lured her in was now a portal to trap another unsuspecting soul. Within the mirror's realm, Emily could only watch helplessly as her life unraveled before her eyes. She observed the doppelganger seamlessly blending into her world, coming and going, stealing her identity and relationships. Her voice remained unheard, her attempts to communicate futile. Over the next several weeks, the doppelganger reveled in her twisted game. She effectively cast a spell over the entire town for her own selfish purposes, her corruption unending, her resolve unwavering. She took pleasure in tormenting the townsfolk, manipulating their lives to serve her dark desires. Yet within the depths of the mirror, Emily's spirit refused to succumb to despair. She clung to a flicker of hope, determined to find a way to reclaim her life. As she explored the mirror's realm, she discovered others trapped within its confines, victims of the doppelganger's insidious game, all mysteriously also resembling herself. Together they formed a fragile alliance, pooling their resources and knowledge. They delved into the ancient secrets of the mirror, seeking a way to break free from its grasp. Nights turned into months as they studied the arcane texts and performed rituals to unravel the mirror's enchantment. Finally, a breakthrough came, a ritual that could shatter the mirror's hold. With a concoction of rare herbs and incantations passed down through generations, they gathered the strength to confront the doppelganger and reclaim their stolen lives. The night of the ritual arrived. The mirror's realm shimmered with an ominous energy, its very existence at stake. Emily and her newfound allies stood before the doppelganger, their determination unwavering. As they chanted the ancient incantation, the air crackled with power. In a dazzling display of light and shadows, the mirror shattered, fragments of glass scattering across the floor. The doppelganger shrieked in agony, her malevolent form dissipating into nothingness. The curse that had ensnared them all was broken. Emily, forever changed by her harrowing ordeal, vowed to protect others from the mirror's curse. She shared her story, warning the townsfolk of the dangers lurking within antique mirrors. And as the shattered mirror was buried in the earth, its secrets buried with it, Emily carried the weight of her experiences, forever vigilant against the allure of reflections that hid twisted truths. The town gradually healed from the doppelganger's presence, scarred but resilient. Antique mirrors were banished, their beauty now tainted by the memory of the mirror's reflection. And though the specter of the doppelganger haunted Emily's nightmares, she found solace in knowing she had triumphed over the darkness that had consumed her world. In the end, the mirror's reflection had claimed its latest victim, perpetuating its cycle of deceit and malevolence. But Emily, armed with the strength of her spirit and the knowledge gained from her journey, emerged as a survivor, an embodiment of resilience and the unwavering human spirit. And as the years passed, her story became a cautionary tale, a whispered reminder that sometimes the most terrifying demons are the ones we see in our own reflections. I never have any mirrors in my place. I know what I look like. Devastatingly handsome, thin, full head of hair. Don't be jelly. Next up, the entity. In the heart of a small secluded town stood an ancient Victorian mansion known as Hollow House. The grand structure had withstood the test of time, its weathered facade telling stories of the past, tales that were both fascinating and unsettling. For decades, the old manor had remained abandoned, shrouded in local legends and ghost stories that kept even the bravest souls away. But one man, Richard Thornton, saw potential in the decaying beauty. He dreamed of restoring the mansion to its former glory and turning it into his dream home. Richard was a skilled contractor with a passion for old architecture. When he purchased Hollow House, the locals warned him of the rumored hauntings and strange occurrences that had driven away previous owners. But Richard was undeterred. He believed that the spirits of the past could be appeased with love and care. As renovations began, Richard encountered the expected challenges of an aged structure. Each creaking floorboard and peeling wallpaper told a story of its own, drawing him further into the mystery of the house. Yet it wasn't until one fateful day that the true nightmare began. While examining the basement, Richard noticed an uneven section of concrete floor. Curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to investigate further. Armed with a sledgehammer, he began breaking away the concrete to reveal an ominous dark hole beneath. The hole was large enough to swallow a grown man, and a chilling draft emanated from its depths. Richard's heart pounded in his chest as he peered into the abyss. It was as if the hole held an ancient secret, one that should have remained buried forever. Unable to resist the allure of discovery, Richard descended into the unknown. With a flashlight in hand, he carefully maneuvered down the ladder into the pitch-black void below. The air was heavy with a musty scent, and every step he took echoed ominously through the tight walls. As Richard ventured deeper, he noticed peculiar markings etched into the stone walls. Symbols he couldn't decipher, reminiscent of some occult rituals long forgotten. Fear began to gnaw at him, urging him to turn back, but his curiosity propelled him forward. After what seemed like an eternity, Richard reached the bottom of the pit. The beam of his flashlight fell upon an unsettling sight. An ancient chamber filled with dusty relics, long-forgotten furniture, and bizarre contraptions. It appeared to be some kind of ceremonial room, giving rise to a sense of malevolence that hung heavy in the air. Among the relics, Richard discovered a tattered journal, written in an archaic language he couldn't decipher. He felt an inexplicable connection to the book, as if an unseen force wanted him to unravel its secrets. Despite his unease, he tucked the journal into his bag and continued his exploration. As the days passed, Richard became consumed with deciphering the journal. The first portion of the journal is written in English, but the bulk of the book is filled with the same cryptic symbols that adorn the walls of the ceremonial room. To make matters worse, the book appears to contain no index or key to understanding or translating the cryptic symbols. He devoted every waking hour to unraveling its mysteries. Each page seemed to reveal more about the history of Hollow House and its dark past. The journal spoke of a malevolent presence that had been trapped beneath the house by an ancient order of occultists. This malevolence fed off fear and despair, and its power grew with each passing decade. The more Richard delved into the journal's contents, the more the ominous occurrences in the house intensified. Objects moved on their own, strange noises echoed through the halls at night, and Richard often caught glimpses of shadowy figures lurking just out of sight. Desperate to understand and combat the malevolent force, Richard sought out local historians and paranormal experts. They warned him that the entity could never be fully vanquished, and he risked unleashing something far worse by tampering with the ancient chamber. But Richard was determined. He believed that bringing the truth to light, he could free the trapped spirits and pacify the malevolent force. With newfound determination, he enlisted a team of archaeologists and paranormal investigators to help him unravel the mansion's dark secrets. As they delved deeper into the basement, the haunting manifestations escalated. The spirits of the past grew restless, and the malevolence lurking below became palpable. Yet Richard pressed on, driven by a mix of obsession and compassion. One stormy night, during the peak of the investigation, Hollow House seemed to come alive. The mansion shook with rage, and malevolent whispers echoed throughout its walls. The team knew they had to act quickly before the situation spiraled out of control. As the team delved deeper into their research, they scoured every corner of Hollow House for clues that could help them decipher the cryptic text within the journal. One day, as Richard and the team combed through an old library tucked away on the mansion's upper floor, a huge bookcase along the wall began to shake, then came violently crashing down to the floor, just narrowly missing Richard. This was now getting real. The entity was actively trying to harm them. As the dust settled, they were shocked to see a hole in the wall that was covered up by the bookcase. Reaching very tentatively into the hole, Richard came out with a dusty notepad in his hand. Inside, the pages were covered with the same cryptic symbols and letters they found in the journal, except that it soon became evident that there was a translation line beneath the line of indistinguishable symbols and characters. They had found their Rosetta Stone that would allow them to unlock the secrets of the journal. With a renewed sense of hope, they painstakingly compared the symbols on the notepad to those in the journal, and piece by piece, like solving a puzzle, they began to unlock the long-lost language. The notepad proved to be the key that unlocked the secrets hidden within the journal's pages, revealing the rituals and methods necessary to confront and contain the malevolent force that had tormented the mansion for generations. The entity, in its efforts to destroy the team, inadvertently had given them the tool they needed to bring about its own demise. As they reached the ancient chamber, a chilling wind howled through the halls. The moment they stepped inside, the atmosphere grew suffocating, and the walls seemed to close in on them. The team performed a series of rituals in an attempt to communicate with the trapped spirits and appease the malevolent entity. But they had underestimated the strength of the malevolence. It lashed out violently, knocking over equipment and shattering lights. The air crackled with electricity, and the temperature plummeted to bone-chilling levels. In a desperate attempt to break the curse, Richard opened the journal and recited passages that described a different method, one involving the use of specific crystals and ancient relics to weaken the malevolent entity. As he followed the instructions, the mansion trembled, and the malevolence seemed to lose some of its power. The team worked together, placing the crystals in strategic locations around the chamber and performing rituals to draw out the malevolence's energy. Slowly the shadows receded and the temperature rose to a more bearable level. As they continued their efforts, they discovered a hidden compartment in the chamber's wall. Inside lay an ancient amulet with an intricate design, a powerful artifact that could supposedly contain the malevolent force. With the newfound knowledge from the journal and the amulet in their possession, the team devised a plan to confront the malevolence head-on. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted, and a cold wind swept through the chamber. The very air seemed to vibrate as the malevolent entity materialized before them. It was a horrific creature, an amalgamation of despair and malevolence that had plagued Hollow House for generations. It hissed and howled, its voice echoing with the pain and anger of ages past. But this time there was something different in its demeanor. As its form twisted and contorted, its attention fixated on the amulet in Richard's hand. A sense of wariness emanated from the entity, as if it sensed the amulet's power and recognized it as a threat. The team exchanged glances, realizing they were onto something significant. With renewed determination, Richard stepped forward, holding the amulet high. "This ends now," he declared, his voice steady despite the trepidation that gripped his heart. The entity's form withered. It seemed to hesitate, its malevolence aura wavering. Richard recounted the words from the journal, his voice resonating with a newfound authority. He explained that the amulet contained the entity's power, the very source of its existence. The entity's swirling mass grew turbulent, almost as if it were struggling to maintain its form. The team rejoined their voices in a chant, their words woven with ancient power and unwavering resolve. As they continued, the amulet's light intensified, its energy pulsing in rhythm with their incantations. The malevolent entity let out a deafening roar, but its defiance was futile against the combined efforts of the team and the amulet's power. With a final surge of energy, Richard focused his will on the amulet. The artifact cracked and shattered, its light erupting in a blinding explosion. The shockwave rippled throughout the chamber, disintegrating the malevolent entity's form. The darkness dissipated, leaving behind only echoes of its anguished screams. As the dust settled, the team realized that the room had transformed. And then, as if emerging from a long slumber, translucent figures materialized throughout the chamber, ethereal, flickering souls. The team watched in awe as the spirits of those who had been trapped by the malevolent entity appeared before them. They were the souls of people who had suffered and perished in the chamber centuries ago, their stories lost to time. They gazed at the team with gratitude, their eyes filled with a quiet recognition. With a final gentle breeze, the spirits began to fade, their presence growing fainter until they were but wisps of light. The chamber, once a place of darkness and suffering, was now bathed in a warm, comforting glow. The team stood in silence, their hearts heavy with a mixture of emotions, relief, awe, and the bittersweet understanding that their journey had come to an end. Hollow House, once plagued by the malevolent entity, had been transformed into a place of healing and closure. The mansion's halls were no longer haunted by the tormented souls. Instead, they resonated with a newfound sense of peace. Hollow House now stood as a beacon of hope, a place where darkness had been vanquished, and where the echoes of the past whispered tales of redemption and triumph. You've got to feel for the entity on some level. Sure, those spirits may have suffered hellishly and perished at the hands of the entity, but have you ever tried being a landlord? So many demands and so little gratitude. Next up, too many Sasquatch. The wind whispered through the towering pines as Daniel parked his car at the edge of the small wooded town of Furvale. A nerdy young man with a camera in hand, he had come to this remote corner of Washington state in search of an adventure. Legends of Bigfoot, or Sasquatch as the locals called it, had lured him to this mystical place. Daniel stepped out of the car, his heart pounding with excitement and trepidation. The town, surrounded by dense forests, had an eerie ambiance that sent shivers down his spine. As he walked along the rustic streets, he couldn't help but notice the faded photographs of Bigfoot plastered on the windows of shops and cafes. Entering a local diner, he found himself surrounded by curious eyes. The townsfolk sensed his purpose and were eager to share their encounters with the legendary creature. They spoke of eerie howls piercing the night, strange footprints appearing in the mud, and glimpses of a towering figure lurking in the shadows. One old man leaned closer, his voice trembling. "Son, if you want to see the Sasquatch, you need to head deep into the woods. That's where they dwell." Their tales ignited Daniel's imagination. He eagerly listened, jotting down notes in his journal. With directions and warnings echoing in his mind, he made his way to the outskirts of town where the dense forest awaited him. The sun cast long shadows as Daniel ventured deeper into the wilderness. The once familiar sounds of civilization faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. He pressed on, the camera hanging from his neck capturing his every step. As evening approached, a sense of unease settled over him. The air grew heavy, and the forest seemed to close in around him. Shadows danced in the fading light, and the sound of rustling leaves played tricks on his imagination. Suddenly, a low growl reverberated through the dense forest, chilling Daniel to the core. He stumbled backwards, his heart pounding against his ribcage. There it was! The figure before him loomed larger and more imposing by the second, its eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity. Fear coursed through Daniel's veins as he clumsily grabbed his camera, hastily snapping a few photos before realizing the lens cap was still in place. The creature continued his approach straight for Daniel, who managed to take a few photos before his flight impulse kicked in and he spun around and ran from the beast as fast as he could. As he tore down the wooded path, he stopped dead in his tracks when he saw a second Bigfoot ahead of him. 2 Bigfoots? He then turned to his right only to see 2 more creatures also bearing down on him. Realized he was not facing a single Bigfoot but multiple creatures emerging from the shadows like ghostly specters. Fear overwhelmed Daniel as they closed in, their presence suffocating. He stumbled backward, desperately searching for an escape route, but it was too late. The creatures circled him, their massive forms casting long, intimidating shadows. His mind raced as panic set in. Should he run? Fight back? None of his options seemed viable as the creatures closed in, their heavy footfalls shaking the ground beneath him. Instinct took over, and with a surge of adrenaline, Daniel turned and sprinted through the tangled underbrush. Branches slapped against his face, leaving stinging welts as he plunged deeper into the forest. His heart hammered in his chest, the rhythmic thud echoing in his ears. He dared not look back, his only focus on putting distance between himself and the relentless pursuit. Worn out from running, Daniel's only hope was to hide. He looked around and saw a huge fallen redwood with a hollowed-out interior. Daniel crawled inside and prayed that the creatures wouldn't find him. An hour passed, and it had been some time since he heard the last of that beast's howls. He crawled out carefully of his hiding place and peeked in all directions. Now rested, he began sprinting his way back toward town. Finally, Daniel burst into a small clearing, his lungs burning and legs trembling. He collapsed onto the mossy ground, gasping for air. It was then he had heard a strange sound, a mix of grunts and laughter, echoing from a spot further ahead. Curiosity mingled with exhaustion as he peered through the undergrowth, trying to make some sense of what he was hearing. To his astonishment, he saw a group of Bigfoots gathered in a circle, but smoking cigarettes and shotgunning beers. The reality of the situation washed over him, replacing fear with confusion and frustration. These were not supernatural creatures. They were men, perpetuating the legend for their own amusement. One of the men finally removed his costume head, revealing a grinning face. Recognition flickered in Daniel's mind. He had seen this man before, lurking among the townsfolk. Anger filled his voice as he stepped forward, confronting the group. "What is the meaning of this?" he shouted, his voice laced with indignation. "Why would you terrorize me like that?" The men exchanged uneasy glances, their amusement giving way to guilt. The one who had removed his costume head stepped forward, his shoulders slumped. We just wanted to keep the legend alive," he muttered, his voice tinged with regret. "We didn't mean any harm." Daniel's anger softened as he looked into the man's eyes. Seeing the remorse there, he realized that their intentions, although misguided, had not been malicious. They were ordinary people caught up in the allure of the myth. "The Sasquatches always captured people's imagination," Daniel said, his voice more measured now. "But perpetuating a deception doesn't honor the true magic of these woods. It only diminishes the wonder they hold." The men nodded, their heads bowed in acknowledgement. A sense of understanding passed between them, bridging the gap of fear and frustration. They had all been seekers drawn to the unknown, each searching for their own form of discovery. The guy from the diner spoke next. "The six of us don't do this often. We just knew you were going to take photos, so we thought one more time wouldn't hurt." Daniel looked at the men, all with their headpieces off except for one. He did a quick head count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6... Wait, 7? Suddenly everyone turned to look at the one Bigfoot who hadn't removed his headpiece yet. "Hey, you're not one of us!" The colossal beast raised his arms and let out a terrifying howl. The 6 fake Sasquatches panicked and screamed and scurried off in all directions. Daniel was too petrified to move. Bigfoot approached Daniel, and he reached again for his camera and shakily snapped off a few photos. But the lens cap, still being in place once again, thwarted his efforts for that once-in-a-lifetime, life-changing photo. Now standing directly in front of Daniel, the terrifying Sasquatch towered over him. Bigfoot reached out, an arm and a hand above his head. Daniel, a statue about to get crushed, and then the creature instead patted Daniel lightly on his head. Daniel fainted dead away, falling straight back to the ground, lights out. Bigfoot grinned, turned, and went on his merry way back to the forest. Upon waking, Daniel left the forest, his heart heavy but hopeful. The townsmen would dismantle their elaborate ruse, but the mystery of the Sasquatch would endure, shrouded in the secrets of the forest. As he made his way back to Furvale, he realized the significance of his encounters. The true mystery of the Sasquatch would live on, not through deception, but through the power of belief, awe, and respect for the wonders of nature. From that day forward, Daniel shared his story with others, but he conveniently left out the part about the impersonators. He understood the importance of preserving the legend and the magic it held, and every time he ventured into the woods, he couldn't help but wonder if he would catch another glimpse of the elusive Bigfoot, the guardian of the wilderness. Sasquatch is actually a great guy, but to say that the man is hygiene challenged is not an exaggeration. Of course, it's not like the guy could just walk into his local Walmart and pick up some floss and deodorant, now can he? Our final story today, The Cursed Coin. In the heart of the Old West, under the scorching sun and barren landscapes, there existed a deadly gunfighter named Jeremiah Kane. Jeremiah, who was known far and wide for his quick draw and deadly accuracy, had a reputation that made even the bravest souls quiver in fear. One sweltering afternoon, Jeremiah found himself in a dusty, dying day-by-day mining town known as Empty Gulch, New Mexico. Sitting at a poker table inside the local saloon, fate, it seemed, had dealt him a hand he could never have anticipated. Jeremiah's keen eyes caught the glint of an unusual silver dollar as it lay among the poker chips in the pot. Called to put up or fold on the biggest pot of the day, Jeremiah questioned the coin that had just been thrown into the pot to call it right. It did not look like any legal tender coin he had ever seen before. What may have been some ancient emperor on one side and some text on the other, written in a foreign language that surely no one in this town would have been able to translate. The cowboy at the table who offered it up as collateral swore up and down, regardless of where it came from, that it was pure silver. Jeremiah played his cards with a calculated calm, his thoughts focused more on the mysterious coin than the game itself. Jeremiah was holding aces and kings, a fantastic hand. He raised the pot again. The cowboy looked at his hand. He had a royal flush, a winning hand over virtually any hand. No poker player in the history of poker ever threw away a royal flush. But that is exactly what this cowboy did. He folded, as if his goal was to lose the pot. The hand and the coin now belonged to Jeremiah. He gathered his winnings and looked for his next opportunity to separate the locals from their hard-earned and fought money. The true test of fate awaited him beyond the poker table. A shooting competition had been arranged in the heart of town, with bottles and targets set up as the marksman's prey. Jeremiah, along with a group of other sharpshooters, took their positions, each trying to outdo the other in a contest of skill. As the dust swirled and the crowd gathered, the competition intensified. Shots rang out, shattering bottles and sending targets into splinters. But as the competition reached its climax, it became clear that the contenders were evenly matched, their accuracy unparalleled. A tense hush fell over the crowd as they observed the deadlocked competition. Jeremiah Kane, never one to back down from a challenge, proposed a daring twist. He produced the silver coin from his pocket. It glinted impressively in the sun. Why shoot at bottles and targets when we can aim for something smaller, something that will truly test our mettle? With that, he offered the cursed coin as a target that would be tossed into the air for each competitor. The crowd murmured in surprise, their eyes fixed on the coin. One by one, the sharpshooters took their shots at the silver dollar as it danced through the air. Each marksman missed, their bullets striking empty air or the unforgiving earth. Jeremiah, however, remained unwavering. As the coin ascended, he took careful aim, his focus unbroken. He squeezed the trigger, and a deafening shot rang out. The silver dollar was struck with uncanny precision, the bullet hitting it square in the coin's head profile. The impact sent the coin into a violent spin, and then with a malevolent twist of fate, the bullet ricocheted back toward Jeremiah. Time seemed to slow as the ricocheting bullet found its mark. It struck Jeremiah Kane squarely in the forehead, a ghastly thud making his untimely demise. His lifeless form crumpled to the dusty ground, and the malevolent coin rolled away seemingly undisturbed by the chaos it had wrought. Amidst the shocked gasp of the onlookers, the cursed silver dollar lay on the ground, tainted by yet another life it had claimed. It was then that a man named Mr. Jasper, the local general store merchant, approached, his eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and trepidation. He looked around carefully to see if anyone had seen where the coin had come to rest, then picked up the sinister coin from the blood-stained earth. Little did he know that he was about to be ensnared by its ominous curse. Mr. Jasper, the local general store merchant, he was a simple man, content with his quiet life until the day he possessed the coin. The instant his gnarled fingers touched the silver dollar, a shiver ran down his spine. He couldn't explain the strange compulsion that took hold of him, but he was overcome with an inexplicable obsession. Mr. Jasper locked himself in the back room of his store, examining the coin for hours on end. He became increasingly paranoid, convinced that someone would steal his newfound treasure. He boarded up the windows and doors, isolating himself from the outside world. The once thriving general store fell into disrepair as Mr. Jasper's obsession grew. Days turned into weeks and the townsfolk grew worried. They could hear his mad ramblings and desperate cries for help from behind the boarded-up windows. But every attempt to rescue him ended in failure as the doors remained locked tight. One fateful night, the air in the store grew heavy with an otherworldly presence. The temperature dropped, and the walls seemed to close in on Mr. Jasper. He clutched the cursed silver dollar as he lay in bed, muttering to himself in gibberish, trying to ward off whatever malevolent force he believed was after him. But his pleas went unanswered. All Mr. Jasper could think about was the coin, and trying to keep it safe and away from anyone or anything that would attempt to steal it from him. He cowered in fear, clutched the coin in his hand with a death grip like vice, and threw his bedsheets over his head. From outside of his sleeping quarters, which were behind his store, passers-by could only hear his screams and pleas. The next day, the town's sheriff and doctor, along with a small group of worried townsfolk, knocked and knocked again at Mr. Jasper's back door. No response. The sheriff took out his gun and shot through the door's lock, allowing them to enter Mr. Jasper's bedroom. They called out his name, not seeing anyone inside. No answer. Then they noticed the shape of a body covered up on the bed. The sheriff reluctantly pulled down the bedsheet, worried about what he might find, and he was shocked at what he saw. Mr. Jasper was dead, all right, but his body was eerily a dark blue in color. The doctor approached the body and noticed that the body's hands were clasped tightly together. He had a hard time of it, but the doctor managed to pull apart the hands, revealing the shiny silver coin, which had appeared to have been clasped so tightly and for so long that it had penetrated the surface of the skin and was embedded into the palm of his hand. The doctor explained that Mr. Jasper likely died from argyria, which is poisoning from silver that builds up from extended exposure and from entering the body, which turns the skin a dark blue color. The cursed silver dollar continued its malevolent journey, now tarnished by the blood of those it had claimed. Well, now that was fun, wasn't it? This is the first in a series of stories documenting this evil coin's trail of death and destruction as it rolls along throughout history. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel, smash the like button, and hit the bell button to be notified when the next chilling episode in the Cursed Coin series drops. Oh, one more thing. I'd check my pockets and your change jar very carefully going forward. The coin could be coming for you next.